Hello, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the Commons in Conversation. This interview series is an extension of our project called The Commons, where we explore divisions in the country and how philanthropy and nonprofits are working to bring Americans together to strengthen communities, even just to strengthen democracy as a whole. You can see our work at philanthropy.com/the commons. Also, sign up for our monthly Commons newsletter at philanthropy.com/newsletter. I couldn't be more excited today to have as our guest Colum McCann, the writer. Colum, thank you so much for taking time to join us today.
I'm so honored. Thank you so much.
Let me offer a little bit of background for those who might not know Colum. He is the author of 13 books and short story collections. And while he and his family live in New York, he was born in Ireland. And I would say he's part of a great line of Irish writers that stretches back to George Bernard Shaw, to Frank McCourt, to Sally Rooney. All those folks he fits in right well. He's the winner of the National Book Award for Let the Great World Spin. It's a fictionalized account of the acrobat Philippe Petit. You may remember him as the acrobat who walked across a tightrope between the New York's Twin Towers in 1974. To give you sort of a sense of Colum as an author and as a writer, it's worth noting the judge's citation on that award. The award praised him for his lyrical gifts, and that's something you might expect when coming with a writing award. But it also praised his generosity of spirit, which I think is part of his enormous appeal as a writer. It's also one of the reasons we brought him here today to talk. So we know Colin is also the co-founder of Narrative 4, which is a global nonprofit that uses storytelling to help young people connect with each other and understand each other better. Now, Colin, we're going to talk about Narrative 4, and a lot of our audience is nonprofit professionals. But I first want to start with a little bit of an assessment from you of how the world got into the mess that we are today. You grew up in Ireland during the Troubles. You spent a lot of time in the Middle East and looking at those conflicts. And a lot of your writing touches on themes related to division. So, what I really want to get is your sense of what are the root causes of this? How do we get to this place that we are today?
I think the finest answer to this question, and perhaps to any question, especially these days, is I don't know.
Terrific.
And the thing about that is that people are sort of scared to say I don't know. And one of the things that I feel that's going on is that we have this disease of certainty that has crept into the way that we operate with one another, so that we're almost in two separate channels, or maybe several different separate channels, where we remain in that channel. Think of them, say, as canals. So we have these canals of certainty. These are these man-made things. They're not rivers. They don't have any swerves or turns in them. And we enter the canal, and we stay in the canal because we want to think that we are entirely right. Also, we're not listening to other people. And one of the things that we do at Narrative 4 is that we talk about the power of stories, but really the power of stories comes from the power of listening. So what I'm interested in, Drew, is the floodplains that exist between these canals of certainty, and how can we get people not to change their minds necessarily,
Mhm.
but how do we get out onto the floodplains and meet one another and shake hands and talk to one another? And I think this is so very important in today's world.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought about that analogy. You often hear people talk about silos or people in their echo chambers, but you're talking about something much vaster, that canals that are separated by Great Plains. You know, you often use the phrase radical empathy, and I think radical empathy being perhaps a means to cross those Great Plains. Can you describe for us a little bit what does it mean to be radical in your empathy? What does that mean for an everyday person trying to go about their life?
Not radical in the political sense. I'm
Mhm.
not asking for that sort of radicalism to come in, but for it to overturn the accepted way that we are looking at it, to go in, to penetrate, and to desire change, and to promote change, and to have these things lead to action on the ground. I think it's entirely possible. I'm an optimist. I go along with the Gramsci's notion, the Italian social scientist who talks about being a pessimist of the intellect
Hmm.
but also an optimist of the will. In other words, the world is dark, but so what? How do we get away from that particular form of darkness? And this, to me, is the question of our times, because we're living in broken times. The theme, therefore, has to be repair. How do we not only repair ourselves, but help to set a landscape where we help repair others? Actually, probably more important to repair others than to repair ourselves.
Well, that theme of repair, and I'm going to jump to one of your novels, the most recent one, Twist, in
Right.
which I believe that theme of repair is so strong. For folks on the call who haven't read this book, a quick synopsis. It's a story of Anthony Fennell, an Irish journalist who's reporting on a ship that specializes in fixing the fiber optic cables that snake along the ocean floor. When they break, the world can't operate. The internet comes to a crash. So this boat will spend weeks, it'll spend months at sea trying to fix these tiny, tiny glass cables and bring them together. And Fennel is on a journey to report about this work. And Colin, correct me, he's a desperately lonely man, disconnected from his family, his community. And the journey on this for him is of repairing his connections at the same time the ship is repairing this digital connection. So I'm curious how that theme came into the book and whether it's appeared in other of your works.
Well, I'm very grateful, and I thank you for describing it in that way. Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, 95% of the world's intercontinental information travels at the bottom of the sea. Most of it way down there in the abyssal zone. Now, I used to think that it went up in the sky, and the satellites and everything went by satellites, that the cloud was actually in the air. No, the cloud is actually in those places that we as human beings have never seen and can hardly imagine what it's like down at the bottom of the ocean floor. And the interesting thing is, there's 450 cables in the world, working cables. Sometimes they break. Could be from a landslide, could be from an earthquake, could be from a ship, from an anchor, from all sorts of different things that happen. And these people have to go out there, and it takes weeks and weeks to repair these things. But the metaphor really is, as you'd said, at the time when we are most connected, in all of history, in the time when we are most connected, we are also the most disconnected. And how can that be? And what should we think about the way that we operate in the world to sort of repair that disconnection between one another? I believe that the repair comes in storytelling, the stories of other people, listening to those stories. And that's what we do at Narrative 4. In certain ways, Narrative 4 is that boat that goes out and tries to bring people back together again.
That's fascinating. I want to turn to narrative four, but before I do, I was curious. I talked about Twist. It was a book from last year. You've been writing for many, many years. Has this theme of disconnectedness and the need to connect been part of some of your other works? When did it first come to surface for you?
It's again, I don't know,
Okay.
but I would explore it in this way. I think maybe my favorite book in this theme is a book called A Paragon,
Hmm.
where I spend a lot of time in Israel and in Palestine with two men in particular, Rami Elhanan and Bassam Aramin, and you can probably hear the sirens going. I'm in New York when you can hear the sirens going on
That's
in
right.
the background. They're hopefully out to do some repair. Um, but that was a book was very much about coming together. But now that I think about it, maybe all of my books down through the years has to do with this. The thing I learned, I came to the United States at the age of 21, sat down to write a book, was unable to do so. And so I went out on a bicycle, Drew, and was on a bicycle for the best part of 2 years.
Hmm.
I did about 12,000 miles, or 8,000 miles, sorry, 12,000 kilometers. Um, and what I learned was to listen to people and how fascinating everybody was, whether it was in Boston, whether it was in Mississippi, rich or poor, or black and white and green and all sorts of whatever it happened to be. Everybody has a story to tell. And it struck me at that stage that I was engaging in the democracy of storytelling, the democracy of listening, which is something that I've been around for quite a while, and I still believe in, even when we see things seem to fall apart. I still believe that we have ways that we can bring all of this back together, including, of course, as you know very well, being philanthropic, being decent, being kind.
Hmm.
To be kind, to be kind, to be kind. It's such an extraordinarily important thing.
When now Narrative 4 is more than a decade old, started in 2012 or 13, I believe. You and some colleagues started it. And I'm curious, you've had this experience, you've traveled the country, you've listened, you know that everybody has a story. How did you decide to, in a sense, formalize the process of having people share their stories, and particularly with young people?
Well, I have to give kudos to my co-founder, Lisa Consiglio, who really is the visionary behind all of this. Lisa decided 12 years ago to bring a number of writers and activists and thinkers together in the mountains of Colorado to talk about what she termed as the highest aim of storytelling. Now, this was the great Terry Tempest Williams, Ishmael Bea, Toby Wolfe, all sorts of like fantastic authors got together. And we basically said, well, empathy is the thing. The ability to step into and recognize the power of somebody else's story. And so through all that, we began this organization, which was launched actually in Chicago by Sting, the musician. And we all recognized that the most important thing was to be able to tell somebody else's story. So the fundamental special sauce that we have is that we bring young people together from various backgrounds. They tell a story to each other, and then they tell the story back to the group in the first person. So I would become Drew, and you would become Colum, and something happens to the mind in a spectacular way. The brain becomes a sort of carnival of imagination and memory and empathy and compassion and decency when we start telling somebody else's story, and we understand on a whole new level. So we've been harnessing that power, which is almost nuclear in a way, harnessing that power to try to create action on the ground, so that young people recognize what's going on in their hearts and in their communities. And through that, they begin these civic engagement projects. So storytelling leads to action, leads to change. It's a big project. I wish it was in every school in the world, and hopefully one day it will be.
I'd love for folks to really see the program and how it works. Talk a little bit about the prompts that you give each of the young people in the program. What do you tell them to write about that you find opens an avenue for that exchange of ideas and letting people step into the other person's shoes?
Yeah, the prompts are very important. So let's say we had young people from the Bronx in Kentucky, which sometimes we bring these young people together, or from Limerick and Belfast in Ireland, or just across the classroom from one another. It can be very local, or it can also be global. And we would say to them, tell us a story, and the prompt might be, tell me a time, Drew, about when you had to repair something. Now, this can be a bicycle wheel, or it could be a relationship with a family member. It can be tiny, or it can be epic. But really, what it gets to is the heart of storytelling. I'm not interested in winning an argument. I'm not interested in changing somebody's political or social point of view. What I am interested in is finding a story that matters, and sort of getting into the human heart in a new and sort of profound way, where they tell something that's entirely personal to them. So we might talk about a prompt that to tell us about a time when compassion was important in your life. Tell me a story about food. Tell me a story about all sorts of things that can occur. Uh, it's endless. We actually have the endless library. When you think about it, it's kind of like Borges talks about, the House of Babel or Babel. And we have access to every single story, and that's something profoundly human, profoundly important. And it's what makes me, I'll be honest, it makes me very happy to be involved in this work.
Do the young people embrace it fully, or are they reticent to go in this direction and tell these kind of stories?
Sometimes they're scared.
Yep.
Sometimes they say, I don't have a story. But everybody has a story. Sometimes they say, but nobody wants to listen to me. You know that all of our young people, including, well, us too, but mostly our young people have gone through an epidemic of loneliness and isolation in the past, few years in particular. And so sometimes they're scared, but once they get into the act of telling, they're like, oh, well, I do have a story. And oh, somebody's listening to me. And oh, somebody's telling my story back to me. And oh, we have recognized a commonality that maybe we didn't see before. So those kids, say, in Limerick and Belfast, or those kids in Kentucky and the Bronx who thought that they were from different planets, suddenly realized, no, we're so close to one another. It forms bonds, covalent bonds that are almost impossible to break. So, if we did a story exchange, you and I would be linked forever.
Could I ask these are not one and dones. You mentioned the civic action that sometimes can come
Right.
from this. Talk about sort of these exchange of stories. What's next? What leads to that civic action?
It's so important to not be one and done. Ishmael Bea, who who wrote Long Way Gone. He was a child soldier from Sierra Leone. He wrote a great memoir many years ago. He's written several novels since then. But he told us once, "Don't drop our kids. If you drop the kids, especially after you've elevated them to a point, it can cause serious problems." And so it's important for us not to leave anyone behind in a sort of new isolation. So therefore, the teachers, who are my heroes, by the way, I love the teachers who help facilitate these story exchanges, continue to engage with the young people. And our ultimate dream is that the young people will go out and they will begin to engage with civic engagement projects, whether that be, say, in Kentucky. It was they started an opioid awareness group.
Hmm.
In the South Bronx, it was there was a commonality of gunshot wounds that the kids were telling stories about, and they engaged with a local hospital and a poetry group that was in the local hospital, in the Kohler Hospital in New York. Extraordinary things, recycling in South Africa. We were in the Joe Slovo township in South Africa, and how brilliant are these young people to come up with ideas that change their environment. And so we can access some of that. There's a real hope that's there in the world. And I think young people harness it better than anybody else. But we've got to give them the tools in order to do so. The main tool, as far as I'm concerned, is a story. They say that the world is held together with atoms,
Hmm.
muons and gluons and quarks and whatever. Sure, fair enough. It is, yes. But really, when you think about it, the world is actually held together with stories. Your story, my story, all the people who are listening to us now. Just think about the wonderful fabric of our lives and how we connect to one another. Yes, we're held together by our stories, not our opinions, not our ideas, because they're divisive. They go into those little canals of certainty.
Yep. Yep.
Now we're out on the floodplain. It's the personal floodplain. I recognize you as somebody deeply human, not somebody who's been down in that other territory. you're somewhere entirely new. And it works. School results go up, absentee levels go down, engagement goes up, all sorts of empathy levels soar. We have several studies, including a brand new one that just came out from the University of Oxford and Ohio, saying how profoundly important this storytelling engagement is, and how it dramatically reduces polarization of young people. Now, this was done in schools in Kentucky, a very diverse range of schools. We're not talking about necessarily liberal or necessarily conservative. It's all of this together. Storytelling goes across borders, it goes across boundaries, and it's the way that we engage and change one another.
The practicality of how you do this, your engagement is obviously over a longer period. Explain how long you're in a program or in a school to do this work.
Kind of want to be there forever, Drew. Honestly, I want to be in these kids' lives forever. I want them to take it into their colleges. I want them to take it into their adulthood. I want them to teach it to their own kids. But yeah, we don't just hop in. So what we do is we have a train the trainer model, and a facilitator model. The facilitator is the person who organizes bringing the young people together. So you might do it in a classroom, say in Pennsylvania. And then when the kids do it, they recognize, oh, this works. And then they want to do it in other classrooms in their school. And then maybe they want to do it with another school down the road. And maybe then they want to do it across the county. And then maybe they will do it across continents. So there is this, a continuity of engagement is absolutely what we're looking for. And again, I'll say, it wouldn't happen but for the teachers and the community members who know that this stuff really works. To me, and you go back to your first question.
Yep.
Why are we in the place where we are these days? I think part of it has to do with the fact that we don't respect our teachers enough. We don't pay them enough. We don't look after them enough. And they are on the front line. Absolute front line. Talk in military terms, our teachers are absolutely on our domestic front line, and we should treat them as the heroes that they happen to be and really look after them in new ways. I think a change of mindset in relation to our teachers is actually very, very important.
That's great advice. Could I ask you said you're an optimist and you're giving us a lot of hope about young people. And often we do invest a lot of hope in young people that they have a different quality of character. They will help change things. Have you tried this program with adults? Do you think that's a different set of issues, challenges? I'm curious how this same program might work with adults.
It works with adults. It works with adults. I mean, we have a captive audience in the schools with 16 to 18-year-olds. We're now developing programs in universities, it's a really important series of programs, and it works amazingly well. In the first year experience programs and so on. For example, Marquette University in Wisconsin, several universities, colleges across the country we're engaging with. We've also run it with people on, believe this or not, with people on the different sides of the gun debate. That was profound. Also, people who were in communities where they thought that immigrants were we had the immigrants talk with people who felt that immigration wasn't for their community. The way that minds and hearts were changed, and the degree of understanding from one another through personal stories was so much more important. So yes, it works with adults too, and believe it or not, with little kids, because we can actually teach very young kids empathy from a very early age. So, but most of our audience are in the 16 to 18, 19 age group right now.
Okay. Could I ask, again, you're an optimist, you're holding out some hope. Can you tell us one example of a pairing of young people that you found remarkable in terms of the understanding they came together, or even communities, but point to one example and give us the story of what happened as a way to sort of inspire us.
How much time do you have? I mean, how
We've
much
got enough
time
time
do
for a
we
good
have?
story.
I have millions of stories. We did stories in the Vatican. We did stories in Northern Ireland. We work in like several countries in Africa where I saw the most profound things. But for me, one of my favorite things is when we brought those kids from the South Bronx
Yeah.
together with the kids from Kentucky. And when they got into a room, Drew, they were terrified of one another at first until they began to tell stories. And then one of my favorite stories is that the young girl in the South Bronx is paired with the young boy who drives his pickup truck through the holler, every morning with a shotgun in the back. And they think they're miles apart from one another. And they sort of seem to be at first until he tells her story and she tells his. And he realizes that beneath that hijab, she has AirPods and she's listening to country music, maybe Beyonce. And guess what he's been listening to last week, bumping down the holler. And he was listening to Beyonce's country album. And then she realizes, oh, I've never met a white boy before who is so poor that he uses a shotgun to shoot rabbits because he has to bring food back on the table. And suddenly things are kind of messy in a good way, nuanced, yes. But I like the idea. Well, I'm look at my office. I mean, I'm a messy person, but I like this human messiness because it gets away again from this disease of certainty that we have sort of allowed to creep into our society these days. So yeah, when we had those kids together, also I'll say we did from Shankill to South Hill, which are two communities in Ireland, and they would not even have known one another. Two very sort of tough communities, traditionally tough communities. And when these boys and girls got together, the world was completely different. And we've done it with kids from all over the country. So it's nice when we see it working. And here's the funny thing, and this is not me just saying this, it nearly always works. And to the surprise of everyone, the real reason behind that is because we're not asking them to tell an idea driven story. And
Hmm. Hmm.
also, they realize that somebody is listening to them. And so, therefore, they must cradle this story that's been told to them. So, they must respect the other person because they want that similar respect to come back to them. It's remarkable in its simplicity, and it's incredible in the complexity that it accesses, both in the brain and in the heart, and also within our communities at the same time, too.
Well, let's talk a little bit. You started 2012, 13. You've obviously grown. You are
Yeah.
global. So I'm a little bit curious, particularly for the professionals in our audience, about scale. That's a
Sure.
technical term, but people are always curious. So I'm curious how you all grew from the nutshell of in 2012 to this global enterprise. And if you would just, we're running up on time, but leave us a little bit about what your ambitions are for the future. You obviously feel like this is a powerful, impactful program.
Yeah.
What do you think you're going to be doing in the future?
Well, I would like the support of everybody out there. Go to narrative4.com, look at what it is that we're doing. And yes, we began very small. I'm a writer. I write books, and maybe I should only be writing books, but this particular thing is so important to me that I almost think that I could give up writing books in order to do this work. And so we have some amazing employees who believe in all of this. We have amazing facilitators and teachers and a whole network of people that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The dream would be to be in every college, to be in every school, for this to be a routine sort of exercise, to get us to the point where this is absolutely natural in schools and in communities. And we're talking about eventually, exchanging millions of stories. We do hundreds of thousands of stories now, but I want to be eventually accessing millions of people and to have a network, almost like a neural network around the world, where if you can imagine A kid in California talking to a kid in Nigeria over, over a Zoom call. How amazing would that be if we could recognize the distance, shrink the distance, and allow the distance to occur? Because I think our understanding then, we wouldn't be coming indoors. We wouldn't be shutting down the curtains. We wouldn't be, putting a GPS coordinate on our imaginations. Instead, we would be opening ourselves to the world. So anybody out there who wants to help, we're always looking for people in all sorts of levels to come. It's narrative 4, the numeral 4.com. And I do believe in the power of philanthropy because it belongs to the power of recognizing other people outside of ourselves. So much of the world is coming indoors, looking at this thing, constantly, and our whole relationship. This thing's not the problem. It's our relationship with it. Really, what we have to do is get out and meet other people in the place where their story happens to be, and that to me is, I mean, to me, it's it's the only answer at this particular point. I'm sure there's plenty of other answers, but I just can't see them yet. To me, this one is the most powerful.
Tremendous. I will tell you, we've been running this project for 2 years, and I've been leading it and writing and thinking in this space. And you can go into some dark places when you're thinking about it. So I'm really encouraged
Yeah.
at this conversation. The work you're doing leaves me on sort of a lift. So
Okay.
I hope to our audience has felt that. Colin, thank you so much for your time and for the rich conversation. Very much appreciate it. We're grateful to have this chance to talk to you.
I'm the one who's grateful. Thank you so much.
And thank everyone for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us for this edition of the Commons in Conversation. Again, if you're interested in following our coverage, we're doing reporting, essays, multimedia. Sign up for our monthly newsletters. Go to philanthropy.com/newsletters. And anyway, I hope everyone will take care and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Drew.
Thank you.